Adolf Hitler, a calm and reflective historical narrative. Early life in Austria, 1889–1913. Adolf Hitler was born on the 20th of April 1889 in Braunau am Inn, a quiet Austrian town on the German border. He was the fourth of 6 children born to Alois Hitler, a middle-aged customs official, and Alois's young third wife, Clara Pelzel. 3 of Adolf's siblings died in infancy, leaving him and a few others in a modest household that moved frequently along the Austro-German frontier. When Adolf was 3, his family relocated to Passau, Germany, and later back to Austria, eventually settling in the provincial capital of Linz, a place Adolf would later recall with fondness as his favorite city. In Linz, the boy led an unremarkable childhood marked by ordinary interests and the occasional turmoil that came with having a strict, authoritarian father. Adolf's father, Alois, was hard and domineering, a retired civil servant who expected his son to follow in his bureaucratic footsteps. The young Hitler, however, was an independent, often stubborn child. He chafed under his father's discipline and dreamed of a different life. Father and son clashed frequently. Alois would beat the boy for his rebelliousness, while Adolf responded with deliberate defiance. By contrast, Adolf adored his mother, Clara, a gentle woman who doted on him and tried to shield him from harm. This domestic dynamic shaped Hitler's early emotional world. Fear and resentment of his demanding father, coupled with devotion to his kind-hearted mother. Tragedy struck the family when Adolf was just a teenager. Alois Hitler died suddenly in 1903, leaving behind a pension that provided for the family's basic needs. The teenage Adolf felt little grief at his strict father's passing. He had feared and disliked Alois, as he later admitted. But he was devastated in 1907 when his beloved mother Clara succumbed to breast cancer after much suffering. Adolf was only 18 at the time. He sat by his mother's bedside during her painful final days, and her death left him heartbroken and lonely. The quiet city of Linz, once a place of youthful dreams, became tinged with sorrow for the young man. With both parents now gone, Adolf drifted, carrying with him a small inheritance and a restless ambition for something more than the ordinary life his father had envisioned. In school, Hitler had been a mediocre student at best. He attended the local Realschule secondary school in Linz, but showed little discipline for subjects that did not interest him. He was bright in certain areas, especially art, yet his report cards were mixed, and he never advanced beyond his secondary education. By his late teens, he had effectively dropped out, with no desire to continue formal schooling. Instead, Hitler nurtured an artistic dream. He loved to draw and paint, and imagined himself becoming a great artist or architect. After quitting school, he spent his days idly sketching the grand buildings of Linz and attending operas in town, developing a particular fondness for the stirring works of Richard Wagner, which spoke to his romantic German nationalist feelings. Those who knew him then remembered a pale, aloof young man with a passionate, brooding temperament, often lost in his own fantasies. In 1907, soon after his mother's death, one 8-year-old Hitler took the modest allowance he had and moved to Vienna, the imperial capital, to pursue admission to art school. Vienna at that time was a cosmopolitan metropolis brimming with music, art, and a mix of peoples from across the Austro-Hungarian Empire. For the provincial young man, the city held both wonder and disappointment. Hitler applied twice to the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts Vienna in 1907 and again in 1908, but failed the entrance exam both times, rejected for lack of sufficient talent in painting. The rejection letters hit him hard. Stubbornly, he remained in Vienna for several years afterward, trying to make his way as a freelance artist. He rented a drafty room in a men's hostel and earned a few coins painting watercolor scenes of the city, pretty postcards and advertisements that he sold to tourists or shopkeepers. It was a meager, hand-to-mouth existence. Often unable to afford decent lodging, Hitler slept in flop houses among the city's poor. Proud and reserved, he had few close friends and lived a lonely, bohemian life on the margins of society. At times, he even stood in soup kitchen lines. These were quiet, harsh years for the aspiring artist, years that he later recalled as a period of hunger and frustration. During his Vienna period, Hitler's character began to take on traits that would later define him. He grew increasingly isolated and secretive, spending hours in libraries reading voraciously on history and politics, and nights at the opera filling his imagination with heroic German myths. The provincial boy who once sang in the church choir now nursed grandiose ideas about his future. Crucially, it was in Vienna that Hitler first encountered extreme ethnic and political ideologies that were in the air at the time. The multi-ethnic city was rife with factions and prejudices. Hitler observed the fiery speeches of the populist mayor Karl Lueger, who often railed against Jews and espoused a strident German nationalism. He read pamphlets by anti-Semitic and ultra-nationalist writers and noted how these ideas resonated with many discontented people. He also took note of the racial theories and pan-German concepts circulating in Vienna's political circles. These influences slowly planted seeds in the young man's mind. In later years, Hitler claimed that his fanatical anti-Semitism was formed during his Vienna days, saying that living in the cosmopolitan capital showed him what he called the corrupt influence of Judaism. However, modern historians have debated this. There is evidence that, while Hitler absorbed prejudices in Vienna, the full murderous intensity of his anti-Semitism emerged later, after Germany's defeat in World War I, when he embraced the paranoid belief that Jews and other traitors had stabbed Germany in the back. Nonetheless, by the time he left Vienna, Hitler had developed a deep disdain for the diverse Habsburg Empire and its mix of peoples. He considered himself German by culture and allegiance, not Austrian, and he dreamed of a Germany unified and purified of what he saw as foreign elements. By 1913, after nearly 5 difficult years in Vienna, Hitler's life had reached a dead end. He was a thin, penniless artist in shabby clothes, with little to show for his ambitions. That year, he left Vienna for Munich, the bustling capital of Bavaria in southern Germany. Several motives drove this move. For one, he had just received the final installment of his late father's estate, giving him a small financial cushion. Additionally, Hitler was avoiding mandatory military service in the Austro-Hungarian army. A draft notice had been issued, but he disdained serving the old empire he no longer believed in. He later claimed that he did not want to wear the uniform of the Habsburg state with its patchwork of ethnic groups, feeling instead that his loyalty lay with the German nation. In Munich, the 4-year-old found a new home. The city's lively German art scene and strong nationalist currents suited him. He lived in a cheap boarding house, continued to paint occasionally, and made a few acquaintances in the local cafes. Those who met him in Munich remembered a quiet, unassuming man who hung around artist taverns but spoke often of politics and the greatness of German culture. Unbeknownst to anyone, including Hitler himself, greater events were on the horizon that would soon transform the direction of his life. In the late summer of 1914, the guns of August boomed, and Europe hurled itself into the catastrophe of World War I. The long, aimless youth of Adolf Hitler was about to collide with the tides of history, setting him on a path from obscurity into the pages of world events. Soldier of the Great War 1914-1918. In August 1914, World War I erupted, and with it came what Hitler would later call the greatest and most unforgettable time of my earthly existence. When Germany mobilized for war, Hitler was living in Munich as a draft dodger from Austria, but far from avoiding the fight, he greeted the war with enthusiasm and petitioned Bavarian authorities for permission to serve in the German army. The request was granted. An administrative oversight allowed this Austrian by birth to enlist in a Bavarian regiment. With jubilant crowds in the streets and flags flying, the 5-year-old Hitler joined the 16th Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment in early August 1914. After barely 8 weeks of training, he was sent to the Western Front in October. Hitler's regiment, known as the List Regiment after its commander, went into action in Belgium and France during the grueling early battles of the war. Hitler served as a dispatch runner, carrying messages back and forth under fire between trenches and command posts. It was dangerous work that kept him at times near the front lines and at other times in relative safety behind them. In late October and November 1914, he experienced his first baptism of fire in the First Battle of Ypres, a brutal engagement in Flanders that saw his regiment suffer horrendous casualties. Hitler survived that battle and many others to come. In fact, he seemed to lead a charmed life amid the slaughter. Comrades later recounted that Corporal Hitler displayed courage under fire and an almost uncanny calm. He never rose above the rank of Gefreiter Lance, corporal, but he did his duty. In December 1914, just a few months into the war, Hitler was awarded the Iron Cross, second class, for bravery. He wore this decoration proudly on his tunic. Unbeknownst to him at the time, a far rarer honor awaited. In August 1918, as the conflict neared its end, Hitler would receive the Iron Cross, first class, an award usually reserved for officers, in recognition of his steadfast courage. Ironically, it was a Jewish superior officer who recommended him for that honor. Hitler cherished this medal and would wear it on his uniform for the rest of his life. Life in the trenches alternated between grinding routine and bursts of terror. Hitler found a sense of purpose and belonging in the army that had eluded him in civilian life. The formerly aimless drifter now thrived on military discipline and camaraderie, devoting himself wholly to soldiering. Fellow soldiers found him odd at times. He kept largely to himself, sketching or reading during lulls in the fighting, but they respected his willingness to volunteer for risky duties and his obvious passion for Germany. Hitler, for his part, felt comradeship deeply. For the first time, he was part of something larger than himself, bound by loyalty and shared sacrifice. The war years toughened him and gave him clear eyes and a mission, as he later described it. He wrote letters to a few acquaintances in Munich expressing nothing but enthusiasm for the cause, seeing the war as a grand test that would purify and elevate the German people. The war was not kind to Hitler's body, however. He endured its wounds and scars like millions of others. In October 1916, during the Battle of the Somme, Hitler was wounded in the leg by an enemy shell blast while in the dispatch runner's dugout. The injury was painful but not fatal. A British shell fragment had torn into his left thigh. Hitler was evacuated to a military hospital in Bielitz, Germany, where he spent about 2 months recuperating. By March 1917, he had rejoined his regiment just in time to experience more of the grinding trench warfare on the Western Front. The war dragged on. Hitler was present at the Battle of Arras and the ferocious Battle of Passchendaele. Third in 1917, once again coming out unscathed. But in the final months of the conflict, fate caught up with him. In October 1918, as the German army was staggering on the brink of collapse, Hitler was temporarily blinded by a poison gas attack launched by British forces near Ypres. He was sent to a field hospital in Pasewalk, in northeastern Germany, to recover. There, his sight gradually returned. As he convalesced, isolated from the outside world, ominous news reached him. Germany was suing for peace. On the 11th of November 1918, World War I ended in an armistice, a ceasefire that felt to many German soldiers like a stunning defeat. For Adolf Hitler, the news was crushing. He later described that moment as a personal catastrophe. As he lay in the hospital, his eyes bandaged from the gas injury, an army chaplain told the patients that the war was lost. Hitler claimed he suffered a second bout of blindness upon hearing this, collapsing in despair. Whether psychosomatic or exaggerated in hindsight, the trauma he felt was genuine. All the sacrifice, all the comrades who died for nothing, it seemed. Germany's armies were still on foreign soil when the fighting stopped, and many soldiers like Hitler struggled to understand how they had been undefeated in the field, yet forced to surrender. In the coming months, a toxic myth took root in right-wing circles. The notion that Germany had been stabbed in the back by internal enemies, traitors, communists, and Jews, rather than defeated honorably in battle. Hitler became an ardent believer in this Dolchstoß Legende, stab in the back legend. It gave him and others a psychological explanation for the otherwise unbearable truth of defeat. As he left military hospital in late 1918, Hitler was a changed man. The Great War had uprooted him from his aimless youth and forged his identity as a fanatical German patriot. He emerged with a clear conviction. The war had been betrayed from within, and he would dedicate himself to avenging this wrong. Indeed, Hitler later said that November 1918 was the moment he decided to enter politics. The quiet former painter who once wandered Vienna streets now saw his life's mission: to rescue Germany, to restore its honor, and to punish those he imagined had caused its defeat. In the smoldering ruins of 1918, Adolf Hitler, a disillusioned corporal with a fiery heart, set out on the next phase of his journey, one that would soon plunge both his country and the world into unprecedented turmoil.